Hey everybody, Dave here. Today we're going to take a look at the system group of actions in Power Automate Desktop. Let's take a look at the ping action. I'm going to drag that over onto the canvas. It says it sends a message to determine whether a remote computer is accessible over the network. I think a lot of people are familiar with the term ping. You may have done this at some point in your life, and so using this is not particularly difficult, but let me show you a few different things you might want to know about it. The first thing is if I go ahead and just put in a host name here, so we could do like google.com. And the timeout, 5 seconds. This is milliseconds right here. Let me just make sure here. Yeah, the maximum number of milliseconds to wait for the ping reply message. So you might think, oh, I should put 5 in here for 5 seconds, but you want to multiply that by 1,000 to get the number of milliseconds to equal 5 seconds. And then this is going to give us two outputs. It's going to say the status of the ping message, so success or failure. And this is if it doesn't actually throw an error. Because I think I'll show you that this can throw an error just entirely. But if it doesn't throw an error, it will tell you a success or failure. And then round trip time, so telling you how long does it take for the message to go to wherever you're trying to communicate with and then for it to come back. So let's click save and let's see how this works. I'm going to run this and it's going to ping Google and then it came back. That's really fast. So ping result, success. And the round trip time was 4. So I believe that should be 4 milliseconds. Let's just see, round trip time. Yeah, number of milliseconds. Now, one thing that I think you may be wondering is why does it only have one return value? Because usually when you ping, like using command prompt, it will actually ping 4 times. And then I think it takes an average of those. And in this case, it doesn't seem like it's doing 4 different pings. So let's try pinging something that will take longer. Let's do something like Amazon.com. Let's run that. Let's see how long that takes. Okay, 34 milliseconds. So this could be pinging 4 times. I just think it's only doing it once. So this is the command that I think it's doing in Power Automate Desktop. And maybe it's doing 4 times. I don't know. It could technically be doing that like asynchronously and pinging 4 times and then taking the average and bringing it back. I really don't know because this does it synchronously, one after the other, and then averages. So anyway, so that's basically how you use ping. Now, why would you want to do that? I can say this. I have never used ping in any automation ever before. In my last 7 or 8 years of doing RPA, I've never tried to implement ping, but I use it periodically to just determine whether or not the infrastructure is good or not. So you might use ping for something like that. So if you had a number of machines and you just wanted to get a heartbeat periodically and make sure that your various machines are reachable, you could use ping for that. Something else that I think makes sense is if you were going to automate the user interface of a website, you could use ping just to make sure that it's up, and then you could launch the browser and go to it. That seems a little unnecessary though, because most websites have a 99% plus uptime. So it seems a little unnecessary to do. I'm just giving you an example. I do think that it is very unlikely you'll ever actually implement this in an automation though. However, it's good to know that it's here. So the other thing I want to point out is that you could do IP addresses. So it actually says the name of the remote computer or an IP address. So let me just show you that that works. I'm going to go with 192.168.1.254. This is my local router. So I'm going to ping that. And I get back a result of success. And you can see that the round trip time was 0 milliseconds because my router's literally sitting right next to me and I'm over a wired connection. So let's see. Another thing I wanted to point out though, is that you can get a failure response, but you also can actually get an error. So let me try to ping a local device on my network. It's named Ariga or Ariga. I'm going to save, run this, and let's see what we get. So, oh, it's going to time out at 5 seconds. Let me actually change that to be 1 second. And we got a ping result of failure. And now though, this is interesting. I'm going to change it to something that doesn't exist. So I'll just put some extra characters on here and save, and let's run that. You'll see we're not going to get failure, we'll actually get an error. So what that tells me is that Ariga with the original spelling actually is a device that does exist and it is reachable, But what I think is that it is just not configured with permissions to allow responding to pings. So that's my wife's computer. Honestly, I forget which device that is, but it's on my network. And so this is a device that I can reach. Let me show you one more time here. So if you get a result of failure, I think that that means the thing you're trying to reach does exist. It is up and it could respond. It's just refusing to respond. So that's something to consider. So in this case, you could say, oh, my network device is alive, but I don't have, I can't get through the firewall or, something like that. And so that is all I have to say about ping. Let's take a look at run application. This is going to be a little more complicated than the other actions in this group of actions. So we're going to go over one input at a time. Now, this says executes an application or opens a document by executing the associated application. This you could kind of consider goes with if process, wait for process, and terminate process. It says run application, but really it could say run process, kind of the same thing. You are supposed to target a .exe file, or you could target, like it says, a document. Essentially anything in Windows that you can go to the file and you can double click on it to run it. You can put a path to that file in here and it will run that thing and it will do whatever the default sort of action is that file will accomplish. For example, let's do like Notepad. So I actually need to find where Notepad is on my machine first though. So let's go to here. I'm going to go Notepad. I'm going to right click on it and that's not going to work. Okay. So what I was hoping to see when I right clicked on Notepad was I was going to see like open in folder or whatever, kind of like if I do Notepad++, I can right click and do open file location. So it brings me to like here, and that's a shortcut to Notepad++ right here. And I can right click on that and do open file location. And now this has brought me to the real location of notepad++.exe. And that's what I want. So I can take this path up here and then I can put it into here and put \. And if I remember what the name of that executable was, I can actually just go copy all of this, put it at the end. So let's try this. I'm going to run it. And it opened up Notepad++. But I want to show you that sometimes you'll run into this. So like Notepad is like a Windows app that I don't exactly know how it's installed. Maybe it's through the Windows Store or Microsoft Store. I don't know. Sometimes they're weird like that. And so you'll right click on it and you don't have that option at all. And what you can do is you'll pretty much just have to Google it and find out where it is. So let's do that. Where is Notepad installed? Where's Notepad in Windows 10? That's probably close enough for us. Okay, so here we go. I was just looking around. I had to, scroll down through this Microsoft answer. And this person says to go to C, Windows System 32. So let's do that. Okay, so here we are. I'm going to go down to N's by hitting N. We need to go a little further. N, go down to Notepad, N-O. We just got to remember our alphabet. N-O, here we go. Here's Notepad right here. So this is the path to notepad.exe. So I can take this and go back to Power Automate Desktop. We can put this in here and \, notepad.exe and save. And now we can run that. Okay, so that launched Notepad. Now, let me just point out, you can run this again with Notepad already open, and it'll open a second instance of Notepad. So some applications are just like that, and it might cause issues, but it actually makes sense in the case of Notepad. But that's something to be aware of, and that can make it a little bit more complicated to when you're trying to like manipulate multiple windows being open and stuff. Okay, another thing I want to show you is that with this application path, it depends on whether or not the application is set up in your path variable in your environment variables. The Notepad exe, like the executable file, is in a place in Windows. For example, System 32 is one of those places that are being watched by Windows. So when you go, oh, I want to run this command, it goes and checks to see if that file or that executable is in any of those folders. So I can just type Notepad like this, and it'll work because of that. save. I'm going to run it like that, and you'll see it'll open just like before, even though I didn't provide it the full path. Now, I think that Notepad++ is not going to work like that because I don't think, unless Notepad++ added itself to my environment variables, then this won't work. Okay, so it worked. I don't know which applications won't work. I'm curious now if I could find one, but a lot of applications will work just like this. Yeah, Chrome, and then let's try MS Edge. Okay, MS Edge opened. So you can see a whole bunch of applications are just going to work right off the bat. You don't have to worry about putting in the specific path and worrying about like that, not, changing over time or whatever. As long as that executable is in one of those locations that's in your path variable, then you're fine. So let me actually, now that I'm talking about that so much, let me just show you. You just go hit your Windows button, type environment variables, and then it should give you an option that says edit the system environment variables in control panel. And here under advanced, go to environment variables. So both the user variables and the system variables have this path right here, and you can open it up and you can see that this is all of the paths on my computer where Windows is basically watching. So if I typed in Notepad, as long as the Notepad executable file is somewhere in any of these, then it'll automatically trigger and run. The same thing for this path up here. So I just wanted to point out, all you have to do is just add the path at the end here, whatever it is, C:// something, whatever your location is. One other thing I want to show you for application path is that you can trigger different kinds of applications. So it doesn't, like it says here, executes an application or opens a document. So you can have it open like a text file, or if you pointed it to a Word document, it would open the Word document. But what I want to show you is you can also have it run things like batch files. So I have some batch files in here somewhere. C:/test, and then somewhere pad system actions. Okay, so I'm going to grab these, put this here, and then what I want to run is sleep 5 seconds. I'm going to grab that whole thing, /. Okay, so this is the path all the way down to a batch file. Let me show you what's inside the batch file, actually. Let's open this in Notepad++. Okay, so it's a really sick batch file that I came up with. I'm really good at this. So, it's timeout 5 and then pause. So it should wait for 5 seconds and then pause. So let's run that. Okay. Oh, I'm going to bring it over here so you can see it's waiting for 1 seconds. And then it's pausing, so I have to hit a key for it to end. Let's do it one more time so you see it. I'm going to bring the window over faster this time. I wish it would be on the screen, but there you go. Waiting for 4 seconds, 3 seconds, 2 seconds, 1 second. Okay. All right, so that's a batch file. We're going to come back to this batch file in just a second to do the after application launch part. Now let's talk about command line arguments. I'm going to go ahead and say right now that I do not know the full extent of this, and I really think this is most likely like just very dependent on any particular application. It's funny. I was saying we might try Notepad here, and it says, for example, enter notepad.exe in the application path and a specific text file in the command line arguments. Well, let's try that. Notepad here, and then let's do like, I don't know, C:/test/test.txt. And I don't actually know if that exists, so let's just go make sure. Test.txt. I came through for myself. I think it's not capitalized the same. It is capitalized the same. Look at that. Okay, it already exists. I don't know what's in that file, so we'll find out. Notepad is configured to watch for you passing it a command line parameter that is a file path. And so I can save, run this, and it's going to trigger Notepad to open, and it will also open a test.txt file that apparently I typed stuff into at some point in the past. So I'm going to close that. Let's go back in. I want to show you another example of using command line arguments. This is what I was going to use before. I'm going to delete this. We're going to type, let's go with Chrome. Let's do MS Edge because I've got Chrome open already. And then command line arguments, we'll do a website. We'll do like rpachallenge.com. And so what it'll do is open up MS Edge. It will pass the website to it Microsoft Edge knows to take that URL and go to the website. Okay, so here it is. And now we're on rpachallenge.com. And I'll just show you that that's not like my startup URL. We'll go to something else like google.com. Save. Let's run that one. Okay, so now we're on Google. Okay, so that is a few different examples of using the application path or name of the application and then its command line arguments to do something, and it just purely depends on that application as to like what it's going to do with this. The next thing is working folder. This is another one that I don't have a lot of input about the different ways that you'll use this. This is very application dependent. The best one that I could come up with though was command prompt. So I'm actually going to put in CMD in the application path, and I'm not going to put anything into command line arguments. Not really sure what I would put there at the moment. Working folder either. I'm going to leave both of those blank, and let's just look at what it does by default. Let's run this. Okay, it opens up CMD, command prompt, and you can see that where it went to is program files, Power Automate desktop. So it's like it started in the working folder of Power Automate, like where we are currently. But what we can do is close this, and let's change this so that our working folder is going to be /test. Save. And then I'm going to run this, and you'll see what it's going to do is it's going to start me off in that location right here, /test. And I can make that be whatever I need it to. So if we wanted to say, let's just do /. Run this. Okay, and that's where it's going to start us off from now. Let's look at the window style input now. We have normal, hidden, minimized, and maximized. 3 of these, I think, kind of obvious. Normal is what we've been testing this entire time. The windows typically will open back up wherever they were last. So let's just see that one time with Notepad. It should come up around here. It might be like a little off. Some applications will actually like kind of move the next time you open the window to move it over slightly, so that if you open the window over and over and over and over again, you open the application a bunch, then it won't be right on top of itself. But that just depends on the application. So let me close this. That's normal. And then hidden is a little weird, and I'm going to run this, but you're not going to be able to see anything on the screen. So we'll go look at Task Manager. Let me just open that up and make sure we can confirm in advance that Notepad is not running. So it would be alphabetically, it would be right here. Actually, that helps. We've got Notepad++ open, but we don't have regular Notepad open. Okay, so I'm going to run this, and it runs Notepad, but you don't see anything. You can't see my taskbar, but it's not open down there. But in Task Manager, we have notepad.exe right there. And the only way that we can even see this, now I haven't found a way that this is beneficial. I think there are some applications you can probably work with while they're invisible, but I don't think Notepad is one of them, or I just haven't figured out how. So I'm just showing you what it does, okay? I'm not even showing you how to use it because I don't know why I would do this. I can't, honestly, I don't know. I'm not sure Power Automate Desktop is built to properly interact with an application while it's invisible. But if you find one and you're watching this and you're like, Dave, I know of a good example, please put that in the comments, and maybe I'll like make a follow-up video or something. Okay, so let me go over to the UI automation group, and we are going to make that window come back to be visible. So set window visibility. And this says we can set by UI element, title, or class. Let's do that. And window title, we'll just do, I think this can take wildcards. Yeah, like question mark and asterisk. Cool. Asterisk, notepad, asterisk, like that. And visibility, we want to set it to visible and save that. And now I'm just going to run this by doing run from here. And it's going to take Notepad, if it exists, and it's making it visible. So it didn't bring it to the foreground, but I just clicked it in the taskbar. And so this is our Notepad instance. If I go back to Task Manager, you can see there it is. This is our Notepad instance. And that's how you can bring your window back to being visible. But again, at the moment, I don't know what you would do with it while it is invisible. Theoretically, though, I guess you could have an application open for some time. You could make it visible, type into it, and then you could make it invisible again, and then go click on some other application. and then periodically come back and make it visible again. But I honestly have no idea why you would do that. So, except just to be silly, that's the only thing I can think of, which let me just say is a worthy cause, okay? I mean, I automated Sudoku and Minesweeper. If that's not the epitome of frivolity, I don't know what is. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this set window visibility thing, and we're not going to make any more windows invisible or hidden because I just don't know what the purpose of that would be. I just wanted to show you what you can do with that, I guess. Okay, and the next one is window style minimized. So I'm going to save this. We're going to run Notepad minimized. You can see that the regular Notepad is not running at all. I'll run this, and you can't see that it opened, but Notepad is open there, and I'm going to click on it, and it takes it from being minimized to not being minimized anymore. Okay, and then we can close this. Let's go change window style from minimized to maximized. Save. Let's run that, and this time Notepad should cover the whole screen. There you go. I'll probably make it zoom out so you can see that whole thing there, and probably in the previous part, I'll make it do that as well. Whenever I did minimized, I'll probably have made the screen like come out so that you could see it was in the taskbar. Okay, so that was the let's call them 3 different window styles because I don't know when you would use hidden. I'm going to go back to normal, and we're going to use that. Okay, so after application launch, your 3 options are continue immediately, wait for application to load, wait for application to complete. Continue immediately is what we have been using. This is basically like don't do anything with it. We basically ignore this setting, run the application and just move on. But we can do wait for application to load. But I do believe that this throws an exception with everything I have tried. So I was editing this video and I watched this part. I watched myself use run application, and then I put in Notepad like this, and I was showing using after application launch the choice wait for application to load, and then I set the timeout to 5, and I left these variable produced on, and I was expecting to show just that running Notepad like this doesn't work, and I thought, oh, it's like that for all applications, and I couldn't get it to work for anything. But just now I tried it with another application, Notepad++, and it worked. So let's just see that it doesn't work with Notepad. I'll run it like this, and you'll see it's going to launch Notepad, but then if I look back here, the app process ID and window handle are both 0, and it actually threw an exception and said can't retrieve main window handle for application Notepad. But I'm going to show you that it does work with Notepad++, so I'm going to close that. I had it open. I'm going to change this to Notepad++, totally different application, and I'm leaving these settings the same, and I'm going to run this. And you'll see that it's going to launch Notepad++, and when I minimize this, we can see app process ID and window handle were populated, so that works, and it didn't throw an exception. So already we're further along, but then I wondered, can I use this output, this window handle, as an input to some other action? So as an example, you can go in the UI automation group under Windows and get set window state. This is just an example that works. For the window mode, I'm going to hit this drop down and change it to by window instance handle. And then in here, you might think you don't have any options because you hit the drop down, it says no options available, but you just go for that variable that is output from earlier. And then I'll change the window state to, we'll go with maximized and save this. Okay, so this is where Notepad is going to open to begin with, and then it'll get maximized. So I'm going to close this and let's run it. And you'll see that it's going to launch Notepad++ and then use that window handle to maximize it. So that does technically work. You just have to try different applications and find one that will end up working. And I suspect you're going to especially have issues with applications that are kind of installed through the Microsoft or Windows Store. But don't quote me on that, but I suspect that would be a thing. Wait for application to complete, on the other hand, is actually very useful. I would say that there are not a ton of times where you would want to do this, but there are certainly specific useful times, for sure. So let's just say that I wanted to open a file. So this is like, let's say, an attended automation, and the user is supposed to do something for me. The automation is going to take care of a lot of stuff, but then it's going to pop up something, and they need to confirm something or just verify something. Let's say that I do a timeout of like 10 seconds here. That's kind of quick, but let's just say we're going to trigger Notepad, and we are going to do the command line arguments from before to open up the file test.txt. And what we're going to do is we're going to wait for this application to complete, which means that I, as the user, need to close it. The thing has to close before Power Automate Desktop will move on, or it's going to throw an error. So I'm going to save this, and we're going to run it. It's going to open up, and let's say I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, let's go, okay. And then I save it, and I close it. Now Power Automate Desktop continued, but you saw that whole time that it was waiting for me to do it. Let's do this one more time, and I'll show you that it'll like time out. So this time, let's say that I don't close this, and I just sit here thinking for too long. Again, this isn't a great example of why you would do this. It's just how. Okay, so you saw it got to like 11 seconds of running time, meaning it was kind of waiting on this action for 10 seconds to its maximum timeout, and then it stopped. I do believe that it's not an error when it did that. So timeout, it doesn't mean it throws an error. It just automatically continues forward after 10 seconds, I think. So the other thing is that if you reach that point, that timeout, your app exit code is going to be -1. So that's something I didn't really point out before. I'm going to run this. I'm going to close this. Watch, see, it's waiting for me. I'm going to close it though. And it immediately continued. The app exit code is 0. So you can use 0 as a success, -1 as a, potentially failure. So let's do that with the batch file from earlier. I'm going to go copy that path, paste it in here. I'm going to go get the name of that batch file, sleep 5 seconds. Let's take out the command line argument. I'm not going to do a working folder. Okay, we're going to do wait for application to complete. First, let's do 10 seconds. And theoretically, our sleep 5 seconds should finish automatically, and that window goes away on its own. Oh, that's not true. We need to go edit our batch script. So let's go do that. Edit with Notepad++. So this pause would have made it stay up forever unless I did something, and I want to take the human interaction out of this. So I took out the pause. We just have the timeout now. Okay, what we have is call to this batch file, and then wait for application to complete. It'll wait for up to 10 seconds. Since this should only run for 5 seconds, we should get an app exit code of 0. Let's save this and run. Oh, let me bring this over so you can see, wait for 2 seconds, wait for 1 second. Okay, so app exit code of 0, but now let's change it so that the timeout is, let's go with like 3 seconds to make sure the timeout will happen before the file or the batch file finishes. This time we get the same thing, but you'll see in the background, Power Automate Desktop has already given up on it. And we got an app exit code of -1. And it says process exited or whatever. You can now close this. I do not understand this. I don't know what's going on here. It says Control D or enter to restart, but like that doesn't actually work. So, and then like hitting close doesn't work. So I'm not necessarily advising you to use it in this way. I just wanted to show you that Power Automate Desktop will give up on that process. And I guess I also wanted to show that this is just a little weird. So I'm going to have to actually go to here and we're going to terminate CMD. Oh man, which one is it though? Oh no. Oh no. Okay. All right, I guess that gets to stay open for a little while because I don't know which one it is. So I'm just going to minimize that, pretend like it didn't happen. But I just want to show you, we did get the app exit code of -1. And we can go ahead and turn this back on. I forgot that I turned that off. It does also output the process ID. So let's do this again. Let's change our timeout back to 10 seconds. Let's run it. It's going to open up our batch file. It's going to wait 3, 2, 1, close. And then we got an app exit code of 0 and our app process ID of 36128. This is not always going to be super reliable, but theoretically, what it can do is when you run the application, like let's say if I did let's say if I just did Notepad and we want to continue immediately, we still get our app process ID. The other output went away. It's going to launch Notepad, and you see we got an app process ID of 26416. Let's say if I open Notepad again, we have both of them open like this, and I go to Task Manager and down to Notepad. I think what we just learned is that this doesn't make any sense at all, actually. Yeah, I think what I was trying to show you is that you could use the process ID to match it up, but it doesn't match. 6876. Let's pretend like that didn't happen. Let's try an easier one. Notepad++, for example. Let's close this. Oh, man. Let's go over here and we're going to launch Notepad++, and we're going to pretend like the Notepad thing didn't happen. Okay, so it launched Notepad++, and the app process ID is 28052. If I go into Task Manager and go to Notepad++, you'll see 28052. That one does match because it's not a weird process like Notepad is. And so theoretically, you could use this process ID to track the running of that application for this duration of it running. But if I close it and we rerun it, it's going to get a different process ID every time, 37288. Okay, so that's just something that you can track it during the running of it at that time. And there are other actions in Power Automate Desktop that may take the process ID. Honestly, I don't remember how many there are, but I'm sure there are other ones that take this in, and so you could use it as an input to another action. Let's look at Terminate Process. I'll drag that over onto the canvas. This says it immediately stops a running process. Specify the process by, you can do process name or process ID. So I mentioned that you sometimes can use process ID as an input to other actions. This is one where you can. So when you're trying to decide whether or not to use process ID or process name to terminate a process, what it comes down to is, do you want to make all of the processes that have that name terminate? For example, if I have calculator open twice, do I want to close all of the calculators, or do I want to close just one of them? So let's see what that would look like. I have two of them open right now. If I terminate by process name, let me go actually see what the name of this process is. So in here, let's go calculator. Okay, so it's calculator app.exe. So I can go in here and do this, calculator app, save. So let me just point out that if you are trying these things out, you may run into problems trying to retrieve the process ID of the calculator apps. So I just wanted to point out that I am aware that that is a bit of an annoyance, because when you launch calculator, you actually don't launch it with the name of its own process, or do you? I don't know. Can we run application? Calculator app? I don't think this works. Yeah, so you can't run calculator app. You actually weirdly run calc, which is the name of the executable file. And you'll see that what I'm going to get is an app process ID of 30928. Okay, this window popped up, 30928. Remember that? We're going to go up to calculator app. There are three of them open, but there is no 30928. And I think that that is because the calc executable, that one had a process name, that had a process ID of 30928, but then it actually triggers another application to run. And this one's name is calculator app.exe, which gets a different process ID. I don't know. I only have some experience building applications, so I don't know why that would be a thing, but it is. So I just wanted to point out, if you're trying to play around with this, it's not necessarily going to work out. I am going to be able to manually, test this out and practice it though. So let me hit stop. We're going to get rid of run application, and we're just going to terminate process by name calculator app. And you can actually see if I hit this drop down, that calculator app is in here 3 times. Doesn't matter which one I choose. Save. I'm going to run this, and it's going to close all 3 at once. Okay, they're all gone. But if I could determine in some way what the process ID is that I specifically want to close, then I could do that. So let's open up the calculator app again. All right, I've got them both open. Let's go look at Task Manager, and we're just going to pick one manually, 30948. Let's put that in, 30948, save, and then we can run this. And I don't know which of these it's going to be, but it's going to close one of them and not the other. Okay, so that's the one that got chosen. And if I run this again, just to point out, that 30948 doesn't exist anymore. That process or program has been closed. So process with ID, whatever, isn't running. And you notice that I just got an error there. So I do want to point out, let's actually close calculator app completely. You can see that it's not running in here in Task Manager. If I run terminate process with a process name of calculator app, it is not running, even though we got an error with process ID before because the process ID didn't exist. I can run this because I'm using the process name. It just works differently. It doesn't throw an exception even if that app is not open. So you can just harmlessly call terminate process, and it shouldn't ever fail if your input is process name. Just to go back to the thing I said before about, you got to find the process ID. Well, there's different ways to do that. There's different ways to find the process ID of something that is running currently. I just wanted to point out that that doing run application isn't necessarily the best way, because sometimes one process will spin up another process. And so you'll have the process ID of the one that did the initial spin up, the one that triggered the other one to open. So that's just something you have to, kind of figure out whenever you're automating different applications. Let's look at the if process action. I'll drag that over here. Using the if process action, what we're trying to determine is whether or not a process or a program is running on your computer. So if process is running or isn't running is the option we can choose. So it doesn't purely have to be, is it running? You can kind of decide which way you want to look at it. It's the same functionality, just backwards. So let's start with if process is running, and we can start with Notepad. I'll do the regular Notepad. It is not currently running. It was trying to autofill because Notepad++ is open on my computer right now. So I'm going to save. And then inside this, let's just put like a custom form, display custom form. Inside custom form designer, I'm going to just put text block like I always do. And then here I'll just put like Notepad is open. It produces variables. I'm going to turn those off because I don't need to know that. And then when I turn them off, it makes this look a lot less complicated. So let's run this. Notepad is not running on my machine right now. So that's way down here. So let's find Notepad++. So Notepad, the regular one, would be like right above this or below this, but you can see it's not running. So I'll run this, and you'll see nothing's going to happen because we didn't meet the condition. We have to meet that condition before we go inside. Now let's change this to if process isn't running, and we're still using Notepad. It isn't running. So now we should meet the condition. It should go inside and run the custom form. But now that I say that, let me go in here and actually change what it was going to do. So I had it saying Notepad is open. Let's say Notepad is closed. Save, and let's run it. If process Notepad isn't running, then say Notepad is closed. Okay, so that's the basic way to use it. Now let's flip the logic back just to what I think makes more sense. It makes sense to go, is it running, not is it not running? That's confusing to say. Let's change this to is running. Is Notepad running? I'm going to change my custom form back to do Notepad is running. Let's just test it one time with Notepad running. Okay, so we have Notepad open. All right, so we have Notepad open right here. I'm going to run this. It should go inside and run display custom form. Notepad is running. Now, what if we wanted to have branching paths? Do something if Notepad is running, but do something else if it's not running. Well, obviously, we could do this if process down here. If Notepad isn't running, then we've got to put a Notepad right here. Then display custom form. Let's go into this duplicate and adjust the wording to be Notepad is not running. Okay, I can run this. It's still going to go into the first one and display that. Notepad is running. But you'll see it actually went down and evaluated if process Notepad isn't running. And so it's not a big deal, but it's a little less efficient that way because now it's evaluating both this and this. We'll go ahead and close Notepad and run it again just to show you that it still can work, right? It didn't run this first one because Notepad's not running, displayed the second one because, because it's not running. But probably a better way to do this, and it may not be super obvious, you can mix and match some of these actions dealing with conditionals. So I'm going to delete this second part right down here. I'm going to keep the display custom form though, and I'm going to drag an else from the conditionals group and put it into here. So now we've got if process Notepad is running, then do this. Otherwise, do this. So now we can have the same logic as before, but now we're only evaluating it one time. So I'll run this. Again, it's going to go into the else because Notepad's not running. Let's open up Notepad. Let's run it again. If process Notepad is running, then it displays this little custom form. Okay, so that's working. So I wanted to show you a quick example of what you might do with this. Because in this video, I guess we've already gone over like run application and stuff. Let's replace display custom form with actually doing something. Let's change this so that it launches Notepad if it's not already open. And if it is already open, then maybe it does something with the window. We'll have to think about that. So I'm going to delete these display custom forms. So if Notepad's already running, we got to come back to that and think about it. But let's say if it's not running, then we want to launch it. Let's go grab a run application, put it in here. Application path. If you've already watched the run application section of this video, then you'll already know this. If not, I'll just briefly mention that you can type Notepad directly into application path. And the only reason for that is that the environment variables in this machine has a path variable. And inside that path is the directory where this executable is. And Windows is watching that place. So if I give it like Notepad, it goes, oh, notepad.exe then. Let me go see if that's in any of the places that I monitor. And this one is. So I'm going to click save and it'll automatically launch that without the path. So let's go ahead and run this. So Notepad is running right now, so it's not going to do anything. But if I close Notepad, then it'll go into the else path and it will launch Notepad. Okay, so that's good. So now what we're going for here is we never want more than one Notepad window open. But if I run this logic, I want at the end of it, I want Notepad to be open. Now let's say that I want to do something though, if it is running, maybe I just want to bring it to the foreground. Let's see if there's something easy for that. Let's see, Windows, set window state might do it. Let's see what's in here. By title, window title, Notepad, restored. Okay, I mean, this isn't bad. Restored, let's just try that. Let's make sure it doesn't break anything if Notepad is up like this. So if Notepad is running, then it'll set Notepad to be set to a status of restored, which it'd be like if you minimized it, then when you bring it back, that's restoring it. So let me just see what that does if it's already up. Oh, okay. I see. Okay, that browser window has the word Notepad in it. And so it restored it. And this has Notepad in it, so that restored it. Okay, that's obviously not the best way to handle it. Window class Notepad. Let's try that. I think that one might be fine. Okay, so let's minimize it and make sure that, so it's open, right? It's just not shown on the screen. Perfect. Okay, so now what we've done is, if Notepad is running, then set the window state to restored. It doesn't matter if it's already open like this, it's not going to hurt anything. But if it's minimized, then this action will bring it back. If it's closed, then we're going to run the application and it's going to open it like that anyways. Okay, so by the end of this logic, we're in the same state, regardless of which path we're on. So this is just an example of how you could use if process along with something like run application that's also from this group over here for system. While this does work for Notepad, I want to point out that this isn't necessarily a good idea to use for all applications. For example, Microsoft Edge and Chrome both don't work the way that Notepad does. So when I close Notepad, I'll show you here, we've got Task Manager details. Notepad is right here. If I close this window for Notepad, this is actually going to go away. Notepad's not there anymore. But Microsoft Edge and Chrome, depending on maybe the version you're on and depending on your settings, it may or may not actually close fully. So like, let's go to, actually you can even see right here, Microsoft Edge is open, even though Edge is not open right now. Like I don't have a window for Edge, but I'm going to open it up. And what I'll do first is just click the X and show you the Edge is still here. And the same thing, usually what you could do, what you used to be able to do is you could click these settings and go down to close Microsoft Edge. And that would actually fully close Microsoft Edge, but it is not. So again, it just depends on versions that we're on. Microsoft changes it a lot. So, you know, it could work different in the future. But this is an example of an application that won't necessarily be closed just because you think that you closed it. So the other thing is that if I ran this logic for Microsoft Edge, think about this for a second. If I change process name to MS Edge, so is MS Edge running? I'm going to put breakpoints on this. Actually, we can go ahead and change these all. MS Edge, and then set Windows state. Now, I don't know if this one is going to work the same. Okay, so this one may not work the same. We're actually going to take this out. I'd have to think about this one for a little bit. So I'm going to remove the set Windows state, and we're going to pretend like it's doing that. Let's just get wait, bring it in here, 4 seconds, put a breakpoint anyways. Okay, so here we're just going to simulate. Let's pretend like we are sort of restoring the Microsoft Edge window back to, you know, being, shown on the screen in the case that Microsoft Edge is running. But I want to show you the problem here. Microsoft Edge is open right now, and so we're fine. If I ran this, and I put a breakpoint here, I'm going to hit run, and we're going to pretend like this is actually bringing Edge up to the foreground by restoring it because it was minimized. And that would be fine. But what happens if I click X? Okay. Task Manager, it's still running here. What's it going to do? If I ran it, it's going to go in here because Microsoft Edge is running, but there is no Microsoft Edge window open. And so it's going to try to restore something that isn't on the screen. And I guess I really should put the effort in to figure out how to do restore window for Microsoft Edge. But I think you see the point here is that what I really wanted it to do, because there's no Edge window open, is I wanted it to go in the else path and do run application. But it just isn't going to work the same for Microsoft Edge. Instead, for Chrome, Edge, and other applications, you want to do something like make a UI element or something to detect whether or not the window is open and just look for it completely different. So let's do like add UI elements, and I'm just going to do the whole window here. I don't know that this is the best way to do it. I'm just showing you an example. So, this is probably something you want to test. I'm going to go like star. This should be like ends with, and then I can take the star off. Let's make sure that we can find this. I'm going to put it off to the side a little bit. That's going to be a little off screen for you. Test. Make sure that it can find the window. Okay, so it finds the window. And this might not be a good selector, but it'll be okay for now. Okay, so we have Edge open. Let me add something from the UI automation. There's probably something here for like if window. Yeah, like if window. By window UI elements here, and then check if window is open. Okay. And then maybe I would, if this window is not open, so let's grab an else, we can actually bring this up here. We'll bring our run application up here, and we can set Windows state. choose that same UI element, set it to restored, and now we get rid of this down here. So I just want to point out, this is something like this is probably what I would do for something like Chrome or Edge, because you need to look to make sure that the window is actually open. It's not about the process or the program itself running on the computer, because it can run in the background. So now let's just see if this works. We have Edge open, but it is going to be minimized. So it should see that the window is open. It should set the window state to restored and basically bring it back to the foreground. Okay, so that worked. And now I can close it. So I'm going to do this. We're going to make sure it's still open though. You can see MS Edge still open. If the window cannot be found though, it should go down to else and run the application. Okay, so I guess it has some kind of timeout in it. Let me go check that out. It did work. Let me just see. So there's no timeout, it doesn't look like, but I'm guessing it's a little bit slow because it's using user interface automation. A little bit slow to verify that the window is not open. And then once it's sure that the window is not open, it goes down into the else, runs the application, and so now we're good to go. I know that took a little bit of time, but I wanted to just point that out in case anybody's struggling with it. You can't necessarily treat every application the same, and only like relatively simple ones, like desktop applications, really, not browser windows and stuff like that. Simpler applications you can use over in system, you can use if process instead of if window like this to determine if it's open or not. And let's look at wait for process. Drag that over here. This is looking for a process name. So let's give this like calculator app. I've already determined that this is the name of it. If I run calculator, this is listed inside of task manager. I'm going to hit C to jump to the C's area alphabetically. Calculator app is what opens. So I'm giving this calculator app. I also could have just opened this, hit the drop down, and then scrolled to find it, or typed like CAL. I said CAL. Why is that not working? CAL. Hold on. Okay, let's try this again. Bring it over here. I got it. We're good now. So I think when you open this, it takes one snapshot of the currently listed or running applications. Okay, so calculator app, wait for process to start is what we'll do, and fail with a timeout error. We'll leave that off for just a second and test it without doing that. Let's close calculator app. You see that it is not, I think, not open. It would be right above the CD viewer one. Okay, let's run this. And because this has no timeout, I'm sure it does eventually have a timeout, but it would be whatever's built into Power Automate Desktop. This would probably wait for hours for me to open the calculator app. So I'm going to go ahead and open it now. As soon as it opens, you see the process finished. Now, it would have gone on to do whatever else it was going to do. There was more in the logic. Let's see. Let's open this up and change it to wait for process to stop. Okay, so let's say that I was running this and I wanted something to happen after I finish working with that calculator, have this running. It's waiting for the process to stop. It's open right now. I'm doing whatever. I'm multiplying 24 times 5. What will that be? 120? Okay, that took me a long time. Now I'm going to click close, and it finished when I had clicked close. Let me open this up, and we'll do fail with a timeout error. So duration, we'll go with 5 seconds. That's fine. And let's change this to start again. Save. I'm going to run it. Now, when it starts running the stage, now we've got like 5 seconds. And if we don't open the calculator app in time, then it's going to throw an error. Timeout has expired. So now let's run it again. But this time, let's run the calculator app soon enough. Okay, so you see it ended. It wasn't any kind of error. Let's flip it around the other way. Wait for process to stop. Save. We'll run this. Calculator's already open. We'll give it a couple of seconds. Close it. Okay. Let's try it one more time with calculator app open, and let's have it error out. Okay, so we're going to leave it open till the end of that 5-second timeout. So right about now, it should terminate. Okay, so timeout has expired. So that's basically how wait for process works. Situations that I would use this, it's really any time that you need a conditional wait. At various points in some videos, I will talk about how you should do conditional waits. And this really comes from me being a Blue Prism developer, because everything in Blue Prism is about explicit waits. So things like tools like UiPath, Power Automate Desktop has some implicit waits, I think. UiPath is very much, it seems like it's implicit waits. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a difference of how to do things. So it's like, do you want to purposefully wait for that window to appear and then go type into it versus, oh, I want to type in that window. I want you to implicitly wait for that thing to show up. So this is something that you'd be doing an explicit wait. So yes, you could potentially do something like, let's say that you wanted to, I don't know, let's say you wanted to like terminate a process as soon as it appears. Well, I could do like Notepad. Let's do Notepad like that. And I want to terminate the process as soon as it appears. It is not running right now. Let me just make sure. And Notepad. Okay, so Notepad is not, yeah, Notepad's not running. I got confused for a second there. Let's say though that I have this disabled. And I'm going to run this. It's just going to immediately terminate Notepad, but it wasn't open, right? Well, I want to wait for it to open before I actually terminate it. So let's do Notepad here. And I want to wait for the process to start. I'm not going to have a timeout in this case. Save. And let's enable it. Okay, now I'm going to run this. Now this is going to, oh, I didn't mean to do that. Didn't mean to have Notepad++. It must have sneaked that in when I wasn't paying attention. Okay, so now I'm going to run this. Now it's waiting for Notepad to start. And it just sit here and wait. But if I were to be like, oh, I want to open Notepad, it's going to instantly terminate it. It's gone before I even saw it come up on the screen. So that is a conditional kind of wait. It is waiting for only as long as it actually needs to, and it's waiting for as long as it needs to, if that makes sense. You don't want to have these static waits, like, oh, wait for 30 seconds and do this thing. If I did 30 seconds here and I ran, Notepad, I would have time to type into it before it went away. But if my goal was to terminate it immediately, then I need to have a wait for process or something like that. So in the real world, though, when would you use wait for process? I think that it would have to be when you don't have direct control of something. So let's say that I think in other sections of this video, like in the run application section, I talked about how sometimes applications are designed where you trigger one application. So like calculator, when you run calculator, this is running calc.exe. That's the name of it. But once it actually opens, it's got a completely different application name. It's calculator-app.exe. So it's like one application triggers another. So I would do like, let's go with run application calc. So you can see it's actually like spelled like that. And I'm going to do a continue immediately because I can't wait for the application to load in this case, because it's triggering a different application. And then I can wait for process, but I'm not going to wait for calc. I'm going to wait for calculator app, wait for it to start. And I might have a timeout here, something of like, let's go with like 15 seconds, because I know that it will always launch within 15 seconds. And then let's say that I have, I don't know, some other logic I want to do over here, like custom form. I don't know. Yay. Done. Turn these off. Okay, so it's going to run the calculator. It's not open right now. Calculator. It's going to then wait for the calculator app to start, and then it will display the form. Let's make the run delay 1 millisecond. Problem is, this is going to happen really fast, so it's a little hard to tell. But this theoretically waited for the process. Now, in this case, I think that actually wouldn't have been the best thing to do. Probably instead of wait for process, now that I watched it happen, I saw this run before the user interface element showed up. So you might want to do the method I showed regarding like Chrome or Edge, where you spy like, or you, what do we use in this? I forgot what a verb is in Power Automate Desktop. Spy is like a Blue Prism term. but you, I don't know, you create a UI element for this and you wait for that UI element to show up and then you do whatever else. So it's all about your particular instance. It depends on the application and what you need as to whether or not you wait for process or you wait for UI element or window or whatever it is. So I just wanted to give you some examples of how you might use this and talk about that a little bit. Now let's look at the action get Windows environment variable. I'm going to drag that over and show you what I see in here. Environment variable name. I can actually hit this drop down even if I have no idea what that's referring to. And you can see there's a whole bunch of them here to choose from. So I would recommend that you be careful with anything you do with environment variables. Now, retrieving them is not likely going to cause much of an issue. It's more setting environment variables and deleting environment variables you want to be careful with. So in my case, let's do something like app data, okay, environment variable name, and we're going to get the environment variable's value. It says search for variable only in scope. I'm going to leave that unchecked for just a second, and we're going to change this to another value in a second. I'll show you why it matters to worry about that. So I'm going to save, and let's run this. App data, you see what it got was C users davm app data roaming. I think a lot of people have probably gone to the app data folder. So if you've ever done like this, percent app data percent, and you run that, it'll launch File Explorer and it'll bring you to a place like this. What that's saying is you have an environment variable on your machine that's named app data. And inside of that variable is this string. And so anytime your machine or any program or whatever needs to store something in app data, you can basically have a very custom location for app data. It can be wherever you want it to be. I wouldn't advise that, but theoretically you could. And so any program doesn't need to worry about messing up like where you save stuff. It can just use what you call app data by using that standard variable name. Now, how is this useful to you in Power Automate Desktop? Well, if you wanted to store stuff in app data or you wanted to retrieve stuff from there, it doesn't have to be just app data, I should be clear. It could be any of these other variables. It could even be a completely new variable. Here's one for computer name. So let me run that. It'd probably say Altair for me. Yeah, so that's my computer name. You could create a new environment variable, and in the next section, we'll do set Windows environment variable where you can create your own. But let me show you the main thing you want to be concerned about as far as retrieving. I would recommend you would always turn on the scope. Now, what is the scope? Let's look at that. I'm going to go search for environment variables. Okay, in Windows, it says edit the system environment variables. It's in control panel. And there's probably a way to get to it by navigating through control panel, but frankly, I don't even know how to do that. I always search for environment variables. I click this, and then it brings me right to here. So in system properties, in the advanced tab, at the bottom here is environment variables. I'm going to click that. Now, what I would recommend you be careful about is this is not a screen to just show anyone. So even like in this video, I'm going to have to make sure I edit out anything that is secret, because you could store secret information in here. You could put passwords, you could put tokens and stuff like that. And in my case, I actually have like a Discord token that's stored in here, and I wouldn't want to just share that on the internet because someone theoretically could take that Discord token and impersonate me, I think. I'm going to scroll down and show you that there is a temp variable here and a temp variable here. At the top, it is user variables. At the bottom is system variables. Let's say that you, for some reason, you want to like, in your automation, you need to store some files temporarily. Maybe you're like splitting PDF files and putting them back together or whatever else, and you want to split a whole bunch of them. Maybe you decide to use the temp folder to do that. Well, you need to decide if you want to store them in the user variables temp folder, which is, you can see, a totally different place from the system variables temp folder. Okay, very different places. Up to you which one you want to use. Do you want to share it with other users or not? That's what it comes down to. But when I go back over into Power Automate Desktop and I hit this drop down, and I'm going to go down and find temp right here. And then I'm going to leave this search for variable only in scope turned off. And I'm going to run this. You'll see that it got the user one. So this was the value in the user's temp. Well, how do you get the value from the system variable. The only way to do that is you've got to turn on the scope setting. So turn this on, and then you're choosing scope, user variables or system variables. So I'm going to choose system here and save, and now I can run it and retrieve the environment variable value from the system side of it, and I get C Windows temp, which matches what it shows down here. So I would recommend you always turn on that scope and don't leave it up to chance where this variable is going to come from. Let's look at a brief example of why you would use this. Let's change this back to user, and what I want to do is run this just to see what it was again. Okay, we'll go into here. Let's go to File Explorer. Okay, we got a bunch of stuff in here. I'm just going to create a text file, test.txt, and then let's go to the file group. Let's read text from file. The file path we're going to give it is the environment variable value. We'll just store it into file contents. So we're going to get, we actually need to append \test.txt. I should probably put this in a variable, but I mean, come on, this is just a video. Save. Let's run this. It'll get temp. It'll combine that with /test, and then it reads the text from it, and there's nothing in it. There's nothing in that file. Let's open up test. Here is some text. Now let's run it again. Here's some text. So you can see that this could be very useful for like kind of being consistent with locations that you use. This way you don't have to like figure out how to share file paths or folder paths across your different automations. Now, I think that the right way, if you are doing this for real, like you are at an organization and you're using Power Automate Desktop that's getting started from the cloud, and you have a cloud environment and stuff like that and other developers, you should probably put your environment variable up in Power Automate. You know, that's the right way to do that there. But I mean, as far as if you're just running these flows locally for yourself, and even maybe during an initial development, maybe you're not tying anything to the cloud or whatever, you could just use local environment variables to do that and then kind of adjust how that works later on. But I just wanted to show you how you could use it. Now let's look at set Windows environment variable. This is something that you need to be careful about. I would not pick any existing environment variables and use set for that unless you know what you're doing and you know to be careful with it. So just in general, if when I said be very careful with setting Windows environment variables and that made you scared at all, don't do it. Just do something else. Come up with another solution. No, you can create a new one. Okay, so let's just type like, you know, something completely new. Okay, and we'll give this some value, and we'll make it a user variable just because it's a smaller list and it's easier to get to. So I'm going to do save, and we can just run this without any worry because we know that there are no environment variables with this name. Now we can do get. Let's actually like get, what did we call it? Something. So we can start typing something completely new and search for variable only in scope. Yep, let's do scope user and that, and let's go disable the setting. Now let's just run this. It should retrieve our value. And so here we have some value is what we put into it. Now, if I go to the environment variables, it's not going to be here because I still have this window open. I'm going to cancel. I'm going to go back in. And now you can see something completely new is one of our variables in the user area. And then the value we have is some value. Now, that's not going to help that much. So let's do something that makes a little bit more sense. So you might have like a token. So you're interacting with an API and you want to store the token somewhere and cache it for a period of time. So every time your automation runs, it doesn't necessarily need to re-authenticate with the API. We could have something like some API token. And we'll put like, let's pretend like this is a token. Looks something like that. We'll make this a user token. And let's paste this in here. We'll retrieve it. It's a user token. And then we could put the value that it outputs to, say, token. Let's enable this. Now, I would think you would have these in different places. So you'd have like set Windows environment variable, some API token. You'd have that in wherever it is that authenticates with your API. And then it gets token back and it sets the token into your environment variable here. So we do this. Then we go look up. We got to actually close this again and reopen it. So here, some API token. Here's my token. And then I'm going to disable this again. We'll enable this. And so this, again, we're in a different, totally different, might even be a totally different flow that is using it. It's consuming this. So we get the token. We've stored it in here. And now we go make an API call and we include that token as a variable inside the API call. So that's using it. You can set. Let me briefly show you this. It makes me nervous to point it out at all. You can update an existing environment variable, something like the path. And I wanted to point this out just in case somebody's like, oh, how would I do that? Or how would you suggest I do that? First, I'd suggest maybe just don't update the path dynamically. But if you were going to, let me briefly say you should, oh gosh, I don't even want to suggest this. I'm not going to build it on screen because I think you shouldn't do this. I think you shouldn't automate setting the environment variable. I know that it's perfectly fine to, but it makes me nervous because it's so easy to break this. If you just set this environment variable, it will delete everything here and it will put only what you gave it. Okay. You can click edit text here and this gives you the entire value. So if you were going to update the path variable, whether it's the user one or the system one, you first want to read the entire value out and then append your new value with a semicolon like this, and then whatever your new path is going to be, C:\test or something like that, and then click OK. And that, well, I guess you don't click OK. I'm talking about it like you're doing it in the user interface. So in the case that you were doing this programmatically in Power Automate Desktop, you would append it, string manipulation or whatever you need to do, and then do set. But make sure that you are setting to include all of the existing paths too. Otherwise, you're going to lose them all. So that would mess some things up. Absolutely, that would cause some problems, especially if you did system variables, because you would lose all of these paths, and that would definitely break some things. You could probably get them back, but I don't know. Oh, that sounds awful. So I think I would just be really careful about that. Something to be aware of. It's just, Now, let's say that you have, for some reason, you have decided to automate the creation of and management of Windows environment variables. I don't know. I don't think you should do that. But if you wanted to, and you've got you want to go back and clean some up, you've got something completely new, you want to get rid of that. Some API token, you want to get rid of that. Well, you can do that with delete Windows environment variable. Paste this, and this was a user variable. It's not a system. I'm going to save. I'm just going to delete these other ones that were up here. And I'm just going to run this. Takes just a second. And then that environment variable should be gone now. I'm going to cancel it, go back into here. And so now that something new, whatever it was called, is now gone. Same thing with some API token. If I wanted to delete that, put this here. I'm choosing type or scope of user. Run this, and it's going to delete the some API token environment variable. So here you can see it's completely gone. So that is interacting with environment variables. I do want to impress upon you, be very careful with setting or getting Windows environment variables. I do think you should specifically avoid setting the path variable, and definitely do not delete environment variables that already existed, like ones that you didn't create, because there could be a number of applications that are relying on those things. But this is something that you can do. What I would recommend, the best way to use environment variables though, is that you just go manually create your environment variable. Go into environment variables, create new, create a name for it, put whatever you need, like a password, username and password, or a token, or an API key, or something like that. And then only use get Windows environment variable in your flows. And that way there's no danger, at least as far as accidentally deleting stuff or overwriting data in your environment variables. So that was the system group of actions in Power Automate Desktop. It always surprises me how much there is to say about what seems to be somewhat simple actions. I know that the run application action is not that simple. There's like 6 or 5 different inputs that work differently and have different options and stuff. So maybe that's not super simple, but the rest of these kind of were, right? But if you were going to say a bunch of words about these actions, do you think that you would have talked as much as I did? I'm always going to second guess myself with how many words I'm saying, but then still do it anyway. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.